Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello and welcome to Program Insight in V News English. Dear viewers, today we'll discuss general elections in Bangladesh, which held after almost more than 1.5 decade. 1.5 decade in the sense that these elections are considered more transparent, more independent, as there have been a caretaker government behind these elections. And these elections are taking place as a result of a change that was brought by young students of Bangladesh who ultimately struggled, and their struggle yielded success back in August 2024. So the Bangladeshi people are eyeing on these elections. It was not only election; along with the election, there was another important development. That development was there was along with the ballot paper, there was another paper, and that paper was referendum. Referendum for what? Referendum for constitutional and governance reforms. These elections are considered extraordinary not only by regional analysts, by international analysts, that it will ultimately decide the future democracy, a democratic rule of Bangladesh. To discuss all, how was the election day? What are the priorities? Which are the parties which are likely to gain seats? We are fortunate to have with us very distinguished former Bangladeshi professor of international relations, now a political analyst based in Dhaka, Professor Dr. Shahiduzzaman Sahab. Professor Dr. Shahiduzzaman Sahab, very warm welcome in Program Insight in V News English.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. So, as a political analyst, the whole day you must have been watching through media the entire scene. We have seen a latest statement by the interim government's chief executive, Dr. Yunus, who thanked the Bangladeshi nation for peaceful conduct of election. This means that elections were quite peaceful. What other political developments you witnessed today?
Thank you. You're right. I spent the whole day in front of the television, and it was absolutely remarkable to see, after so many years, as you said, a decade and a half, a clean election, almost like the one you have in Western countries. There were really no serious problems that one would note. And the security mechanism was absolutely perfect, and people just in Dhaka, especially, they rejoiced. The families went together, and they just cast their vote. It was especially memorable for the younger generation who had deprived voting for since they were born and since they grew up. Many of them are in their 30s now and were at their first opportunity to vote. Uh, the whole country really underwent a transition that goes back to the memories of like 2008 when we had the last election. The interesting aspect of it, of course, was that the turnout could have been bigger. It could have been almost like a 70% turnout, but then the turnout, as it seems now, has been just barely 50%. And it's
Even
not,
50% is very good.
It's very good, yes, in terms of the realities that we have. One has to remember that one of the real strong political parties of the past, which had bestowed so much sufferings on the people for 1.5 decades, Army League, that was kept out of the elections. And in spite of the fact that both the main major parties had wooed the Army League for a vote, it appears that their turnout was almost like zero. And they stayed away from the elections because their leader, Sheikh Hasina, had advised the Army League not to go and cast their vote.
That means they boycotted elections.
They boycotted. They boycotted. In fact, there are many, I've seen Indian analysts in Dhaka who want to look at this Army League boycott as a unfair reality, that the election was free but it was not fair. This is exactly a quote from an Indian journalist from Delhi. But
So
the
Indian reporting
Indians,
is biased about BD elections. True?
yes, of course. And the Indians have been very biased about the election. The problem with the Awami League was that it had ceased to be a political party. It had turned into a very violent party, a political institution, and it openly subscribed to the notion of fascism. It didn't really believe in one man, one vote idea anymore. And then this sort of an organization cannot be allowed in a democratic setup. So when you have a reality where there are those army leaguers who stay away, this would be a problem for the country in the future. However, not to go into the negative aspect, to be on the positive side, now the results are almost coming out. It's been shown on the television. Different centers are
Giving
going
the
ahead
result.
with the results, and it's not really something that one can anticipate that there would be neck to neck competition, which one thought. It seems that the BNP and the Army League are, of course, competing. There are very sharp numbers that seem to indicate that the figures could change. But the trend so far indicates that in most of the centers is the BNP, which has a slight lead, except for the bordering regions of Bangladesh, like those near Indian border, where, of course, the Jamaat has performed better. Uh, so we would expect that by midnight, perhaps, we should be able to get a clear idea of who's going to form the next government. But however, as you had mentioned, I'm very happy to say that today the people of this country rejoiced. They really had a very clear realization that they could be as good and as civilized in casting their vote, in applying their democratic rights, just like any other mainstream democracy in the world. Of course, thanks to the military people and the security establishment, especially several lakhs of security people and the armed forces who passionately dedicated themselves towards every little beat of protection of the right to vote for the elderly, for the impaired, those
I
in the
mean, they
wheelchair.
overall performed very good security duty for everyone almost, and they ensured that
Yeah.
elections take place in a safe environment. So, my
They,
next
they,
immediate question is along with the ballot paper, there was another ballot paper that was part of a referendum, constitutional and governance reforms. Why the Bangladeshi people's consent was sought through this referendum, and if people give their consent, most people give their consent in favor of these constitutional and governance reform. What will happen? Who will initiate these constitutional and governance reforms?
well, that is a very interesting point. It all happened because of the fact that over the last decade and a half, democracy was snatched away in such a manner that there was no certainty that we would be able to preserve civilized norms of human rights and democratic behavior. This had to be done in order to bring about changes that would stay, even in spite of the fact that the constitution may not be amended easily, even in spite of the fact that a majority party may not like to make the amendments. But the changes that were worked out over 1.5 years among the major political parties, sitting with constitutional experts and also electoral reform people look for certain norms like that someone elected as a prime minister should not be in office for more than 2 terms, and norms like electoral behavior, parliamentary approach in democracy, parliament's powers and functions. And these were done by another ballot paper, and the yes consent which came around, it sort of assures democratic norms in a manner where the average expectation of parliamentarians and of political parties can be conducted without any trend towards any dictatorial behavior in the future.
Professor, it looks whatever are the ground realities so far, the counting and the vote result that comes from different constituencies, it looks that BD is going towards an hung parliament. I mean, there is likely to be a coalition government. If so, which parties are expected to be part of expected coalition government?
I don't think that there would be a coalition government. I think that the way the trends are visible, I think the BNP is more likely to get a clear majority. And if
clean
that is
sweep.
the case,
You are saying a clean sweep is expected.
Clean sweep. But then it will be competed very strongly by the major opposition party, which is the Jamaat-e-Islami. As you know, the Jamaat-e-Islami has a coalition partner by itself. It is the Students' Front, and it is expected that some of them may be
part of the coalition government.
Yeah, they will get a few seats. Now, if the BNP gets a clear majority, it is as the BNP leader Tariq Rahman has already declared that the BNP is capable of getting enough seats to form a government by itself. So, no coalition is possible because it's basically a two-party system, except for the Students' Party, which will be a very small number party. Jamaat will probably stand out as the main opposition party. But the real question is, how many seats can the Jamaat capture eventually? In order to be able to give a very clear verdict that there is a strong opposition. People in the country, of course, would like to see that the Jamaat also gets a competitive number of seats, so that the BNP does not have an opportunity to take steps that can result out of a two-third majority. This is an area on which, of course, the constitutional mechanism, the consent on governance, perhaps has a role to play. That even if a party has a clear majority, almost like a two-third majority, it won't be allowed to move towards any such behavior that violates the norms of average democratic outcomes through parliamentary decisions.
What will be the key priorities of the new government that vis-a-vis Bangladesh, as I mentioned earlier, reforms? What will be the key agenda, the key priorities of the new government?
This is, of course, a very interesting question. The key priority for the BNP government would be, of course, to ensure that the new Prime Minister, Tariq Zia, given his long absence from the country, grapples with the reality of conducting parliamentary business effectively. Now, the BNP that will take over power under Tariq Zia will have a lot of very difficult, complex issues to deal with. Even though it may have a clear majority, the first question is, whether the new Prime Minister Tariq Zia can have his really confidence in his cabinet. It is almost seen and considered likely that the senior members of the BNP who have run the show for all these years, they will probably be the leading members of the Tariq Zia cabinet. But then there are very strong rumors that there are many members within the BNP who seem to support the idea of a transition to a new generation of leadership. There are also many younger people, mid-level leaders in the BNP who had made tremendous sacrifices and had suffered during the 16 year of Hasina rule, who are in a state of indecision and not really very sure about the directions that the older generation BNP might take. For example, if tomorrow if the government is announced and if Professor Yunus sets a date to hand over, it might just happen within the next 1 week. So it's the way it seems to me is that Tariq Zia is psychologically prepared to sort of unload his own agenda of reforms. The way he has been addressing the crowds over the last few days, it seemed to me that he has clearly drawn a line between him and the older generation leaders. There are very sensitive issues which the BNP has to deal other than confront a religion-based opposition like Jamaat in the parliament. For the BNP, there is a question of whether Tariq Zia would like to reform his attitude towards Jamaat, whether he might show a more reconciliatory attitude towards Jamaat, something that his father always supported. Then there is this question of how much balance he can make between those who have been denied parliamentary seats in despite their role in the BNP and the old guard who want to have a very sharp urge to retain power. You know, the real difficult question is whether Mr. Tariq Zia could be able to find avenues to change BNP in the direction that Professor Yunus had initiated, which would mean that as Professor Yunus, under his lieutenants and his very, very effective technocratic leadership, had initiated new ideas regarding our security planning, new ideas regarding our economic relations with the United States. Just even a few days before this government would come to an end, Professor Yunus's cabinet initiated new ties with the United States, including the purchase of about something like 20 large Boeing planes. And there are rumors that what was the compulsion to suddenly expand a fleet of planes, all from the same country as the US. Now, obviously, he has certain ideas. The question is, there is also a change in relationship with India, a very sharp change of relationship with India. The question is, how much would Tariq Zia, as the Prime Minister, would initiate ideas of continuing that sharp change, despite the fact that some of the older generation leaders in BNP might be more inclined towards having a balanced relationship with India. Now, then there is also the $1 million question of how Tariq Zia would look at the Army League. In the near future, there's a possibility that the Indian government would be looking up at Tariq Zia and the new BNP
This is what
government.
my next question is. Please answer in response to my question. Previous government, as you were referring, Hasina Wajid's government was under tremendous Indian pressure. New Delhi used to dictate Bangladeshi government headed by Hasina Wajid. So, Mr. Tariq Zia, if he becomes Prime Minister, do you think it will be quite easy for him to run the affairs free from Indian influence?
No, no, not at all.
Not at all.
Because
Hmm.
not free, not at all free.
India will
This
try
is
to
where
put influence.
the reason is that even before he had come back to Bangladesh from Britain, his major concern was his personal security. And it has been said that Tariq Zia wanted to have Indian guarantees that his security would not be at stake once he comes back to Dhaka. These are not something that I can prove to you, but these were all in the media that before he arrived in Dhaka, he had some sort of an understanding that India would make sure that their machinery, their security machinery, would be very sensitive and conscious of Tariq Zia's personal life security. So once he's back, there is a lot of rumor that he might feel obliged towards the present Indian government to ensure that there is a new improvement of ties compared to the reality of the. It's quite possible that Tariq Zia might disassociate himself from the earlier obligations towards India. It all depends on the pressures that come from within his party. There are a few individuals, in his party who play a key role, a motley of senior leaders who are losing their popularity very sharp within the BNP structure. And it's quite possible that Tariq Zia might take over and gradually dump these senior leaders who are totally tied by the compulsions during the Hasina time. And this is where I think Tariq Zia's foreign policy autonomy would be at test. And this is where, of course, the Jamaat will play a considerably important role. So in the next few days, these are, of course, issues that will come ahead. But then, as I think that the question of forming the cabinet, the question of the parliamentary procedures, parliamentary protocol, these will dominate perhaps the next 1 month or so, and then finally he will be stepping into the hard reality. There is also a bigger question of whether Tariq Zia can at all consolidate his position as the future prime minister. It is something that is not guaranteed. It is not something that he can inherit. After all, there are strong pressures within the new parliament that a prime minister cannot hold term more than twice. This is where holding a term twice means 10 years. And in the context of present-day democracies, 10 years is a very long time. And we've already been very tired of the way Hasina used her 15 years or so. So the question is that even in the future government which comes to power, you mentioned the word coalition, but there will be a lot of pressures from within the parliament. But it is too early, of course. I mean, it is only about 9:30, 10 in the evening in Dhaka. So tomorrow by this time, the structure of the parliament, next parliament, would be. It's still too uncertain to predict. But
exactly.
I think,
So, among many other things, Pakistan-Bangladesh relations remain very bad under Hasina Wajid's rule. Of course, there is obvious reason she was under tremendous Indian pressure. During this interim government headed by Dr. Yunus, Pakistan-Bangladesh relations witnessed a new era. There have been exchange of high-level visits. There have been top military and air force officials of Bangladesh visiting Pakistan. Pakistani Interior Minister Mr. Mohsen Naqvi and Pakistani Foreign Minister, Mr. Ishaq Dar, visited Dhaka. Now, what will be the policy of newly elected government, whosoever becomes the Prime Minister? What will be the policy or relations of Bangladesh towards Pakistan?
My guess is that Tariq Zia would certainly like to continue the close ties that has emerged between Bangladesh and Pakistan. It is absolutely vital for Bangladesh's national security that, especially in the military realm, in the security establishment, Bangladesh has developed very much long-term viable defense ties, which would completely transform our security structure. And Tariq Zia, I think the BNP government would probably face pressures from India. But the fact is that the Indians, I think, realize that Bangladesh has already gone too far in building security ties with Pakistan. And there is no way that Tariq Zia could change it or backtrack. And there is no reason why he should backtrack. He doesn't need the Indian dependence. And in recent times, the cricket experience has been an eye opener to prove to the people in Bangladesh how much they resented the Indian attitude of domination towards Bangladesh. The memories are too fresh, and India will have a very difficult time to rebuild its image of acceptance towards Bangladesh. I have heard Indian security expert to just this evening being so unrealistic about the way that they approach Bangladesh. There is an attitude among Indian security experts to undermine the importance of our long relationship with China and Pakistan. The biggest problem that one has to reconcile with, that Tariq Zia also, BNP must realize is that the Indians tend to believe that as if the relationship that they had established with Hasina had been lasting for as long as Bangladesh had existed. But in reality, in the Hasina's close proximity with India actually started around 2015. I mean, the type of defense relationship, the type of secret treaties with India, these were very recent. When you look back to Ershad, President Zia, Begum Khaleda Zia, you can see that the bulk of the period that Bangladesh existed involved very reliable ties with Pakistan.
So future of Pakistan-Bangladesh relation is also very bright when newly elected government take place. Thank you so much indeed, Professor Dr. Shahiduzzaman, Senior Political Analyst, former Professor of International Relations at Dhaka University, for spending time and sharing your insights on elections in Bangladesh. Dear viewers, till our next program, goodbye and Khuda Hafiz.